Hello, hello, and welcome again to the series of Pop the Kettle On and Getting to Know You. Today, we have someone that we haven't seen for a long time on the Spiritual Co-op pages, Maiya Kenny. Now, Maiya, it's lovely to have you here. Thank you for agreeing to coming on. And well, you're very, very welcome. Now, Maiya, you've recently rebranded, haven't you?
Well, yes, I'm in the middle of it.
You're in the middle of it.
I have attempted it a couple of times to start a new website, but third time lucky. So yes, I have.
So,
I basically wanted to come out. I felt like I was hiding behind Healing Steps. Basically, I am Healing Steps, so what was the point?
I know, and I think this is the thing about this series is actually getting a lot of our practitioners from behind the counter and coming out.
Yeah.
You know, this is very much a coming out process for a lot of us, you know, in our own spiritual way. And we're so good at hiding behind our modality, our products, our whatever we do, that we forget that, you know, people come to us because of us and who we are. Yeah. So it's really interesting like that. But anyway, tell me a little bit about yourself. How did you tell me about how you grew up, where you grew up, and how you got to this point?
Okay, how long do you have? It's a long story. Birthday. Well, I was born in England. I'm an only child, and when I was 7, my parents decided to immigrate to Australia. And 3 months after we landed here, I was packed off to boarding school. So,
oh wow,
that was a very big life lesson. But I can look back on it now and say it was a good thing. It certainly wasn't a good thing living through it, and it wasn't a good thing for a very long time. But I can see how beneficial that was in a number of different areas. But it certainly made me very self-sufficient, which on the one hand is a good thing, on the other hand isn't, because I sort of put up walls and no one was allowed in, and I had to do everything by myself and all that sort of stuff. So yeah.
So what made them?
Very big mark against my mother. So that was,
right.
I blamed her for sending me to boarding school. Yeah.
Right. So how come boarding school? Why was it so necessary? Or was it necessary?
That is the $1 million question. Her reasoning was that she needed to go to work, and we didn't know anyone here. And I remember thinking when I was young, or maybe 9, thinking, well, that logic doesn't make sense to me. So if you didn't send me to boarding school, you would need to work. And I was really close friends with a girl who lived around the corner who had 4 brothers, and I could have very easily stayed with them. But, you know, that was her answer, and it continued to be her answer right through her life.
And it's quite interesting, isn't it? Because I truly believe that we choose our families, our parents for the lessons that we need to learn. And obviously, you know, this really started at a very, very young age for you, which then, you know, this is the starting point of you finding yourself and your healing process as well.
Yeah. It's interesting when you look back in hindsight to see all of the things that have happened to you during your life and how where you are now. Whereas for, 40-something years, I just railed against it. Now I can actually. She passed away in 2004, and we had a very interesting relationship. And I've done so much work on it, and I've come to a place now where I can thank her for what she taught me. And she pops in from time to time and we have a chat, and I've lost all the resentment, all the anger I had towards her. So I tell people, you can do the work on your relationships while people are alive, but you can do an awful lot more after they've gone. So
Yeah. So tell me, how did you get from, that 7-year-old and what to this point? What's been happening for you to actually
Well, I went to a Catholic boarding school, so whilst the nuns were very cruel, I can see how that has helped my spiritual development. And I remember years and years ago, maybe 30 years ago, saying to someone, I think that if you're being brought up Catholic, it's not such a big leap, um, into spirituality, because we were brought up believing in angels and believing in, life after death and all that sort of stuff. So it's not such a foreign thing. It's easier to accept, I guess. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah. So
So life went on. I fell pregnant when I was 17 and got sent off to an unmarried mother's home. So that was strike two against my mother. So for me, it was all about um, I disappointed her. I wasn't good enough, and all the rest of it. So I put my baby up for adoption, which was what you did back then. And then 3 days before the 30 days were up, I revoked my consent and I got him back. So that
oh
was,
wow.
yeah, very interesting time. And my mother's response was she didn't want to make it easy for me. And I think that sums up our relationship.
Wow.
So, yes. So 13 months later, I married his father and we've gone on to have 3 more children and 11 grandchildren. And we're still married. So
Wow. So
it's been an interesting ride.
and how did you get onto theta healing?
Theta healing came a little later in my spiritual journey. I started off with meditation. There
Okay.
was a group that used to meet near where I lived in Sydney, and she was actually the beautician that I used to go and see. And so I started with that, and then she suggested I go and see a counsellor. So I went and started seeing this counsellor, who is probably the one person that's responsible for me ending up where I am now. So she was a psychologist. She did hypnotherapy, but she had a very high spiritual bent, for want of a better word. And I then I was working in disabilities at the time, running a group home for teenagers in wheelchairs. Just wondering how much of the story you want. We'll be here all day. And I left there and sat at home and did cross stitch for 2 months. And then I picked myself up and thought, okay, so what is it that I want to do? I knew I didn't want to go back into disabilities. I'd worked in a special school for 12 years before I had that next job. And I thought, I've always wanted to do massage, but I'd had huge problems with my back and my neck over the years, mainly because I didn't lift properly. And I thought, well, rather than spend, what was it at the time, thousands of dollars to do a course, I went and did, I think it was an 8-week course with the community college. And there were, oh no, I won't go into that. There were nuns doing the course. There was a place nearby that nuns from all over the world came to do to study, and they were allowed to do one subject to the community college. So there was all these nuns in class, and I think I learnt more from the nuns than I did about the massage. But here they were in all various stages of undress, lying on these school desks, and it was like, these were like nuns I'd never met before in my life. So I learnt massage, and then I went on to do another course, and then I learnt Reiki, and then I did Bowen therapy. I did a lot of workshops and things in between. And then in 2000, I did a 2-year spiritual healing course at the same time as I did a 2-year holistic counselling diploma. And I started seeing clients for counselling, and I never wanted to be, the counsellor that everybody else, that we were trained to be, the 50-minute hour and, come back next week and keep them coming for weeks at a time. So I used to see them for counselling, and then I would suggest that we have a session, a Bowen session, to actually shift it out of their body. I would teach them tapping. I would give them bushflower essences. And it was because I didn't want to create any more codependent relationships. I'd had one with my mother and I was never having another one. And I basically wanted people to have tools that they could use themselves, so that they didn't have to keep coming and sitting in front of me. So it wasn't until 2008 that I did my first theta healing course, and those 3 days of that course just blew me away. So in that 3 days, I found all of the things that I had gathered on my journey thus far, and I found the tools that I'd been searching for. So my whole journey up to that point had been trying to find things to heal myself, which is what we all do when we get into this stuff. And I hadn't found it. So I had 3 issues in my life. So going to boarding school, being sent away when I was 17, and my father died when I was 23. He and Mum went back to England for a holiday, and he was hit by a drunk driver. And I was pregnant. He was in a coma for 10 days, but because I was pregnant, I couldn't get over there. So I didn't get to say goodbye to him. So that was huge. So those 3 things I knew them. I didn't need to go and have hypnotherapy. I didn't need to do breath work to find out what they were. But none of the things that I'd done had given me the tools to take the raw emotion off them. I had seen counsellors, I'd seen psychologists, I even had 3 sessions with a psychiatrist, which was hopeless. And none of them really helped me until I found theta healing. And it was the work that I did around my father's death with theta healing that showed me just how powerful it was. So I had got to that point that I couldn't talk about him because I would start sobbing. I used to go to Mum's place and I'd put the photos face down so I couldn't see them. A long story around it. It was actually frozen grief, because he was in a coma for 10 days, and every time I cried, I'd go into labour. And I'd spent 10 weeks in hospital with the previous pregnancy. So I was very determined I wanted to stay at home, because this was back in the dark ages when we had a phone that was attached to the wall in the lounge room. And so I wanted to be near the phone. That was the only contact I had to find out what was going on. So every time I cried, the contractions started, so I would swallow a Valium tablet. So what happened basically was that the grief was frozen before he even passed away. So just doing those 3 days, it gave me tools to release the anger and resentment I had around my mother, which was enormous, and to take away that raw pain and from Dad's death. And I did that 3-day course, I think probably in the March, and then later in the year I did the advanced course. And when I started using those tools with my counselling clients, how quickly we were able to resolve issues that they had. And that's been my journey with theta healing, working with my clients to remove those emotional issues that they have. There's so many other things you can do with it. And so in 2010, I did the teacher training, and that's really my passion. I just love teaching it. I love watching the change in people. They come in and they just blossom over those 3 days. It's amazing. That's my passion.
a lot of the things that we do in our spiritual work, we tend to find that we get into this real low point. How did you feel? Did you discover theta healing before you hit this low point, or was there a low point that you really had to work at before coming to theta healing?
The low point was probably the low point would have been before. It was probably the impetus I needed to sort of start looking to see what I could find to help heal. I also realised when I had my opening here for Healing Steps that what I'd done was gather all of the tools that I wished I'd had when I was working with those teenage kids in wheelchairs. I was able to talk about death. I couldn't talk about that before because I just cry. And the boys that I worked with had muscular dystrophy, so they were dying. To be able to talk about sexual abuse, to know what to say. So I'd gathered all of the things that I wished I'd had in my tool bag when I was working with them. So even though it was a very difficult time for me personally, those 3.5 years I spent there, it was a huge time of growth. So I can thank them for what they taught me and what they pushed me to do, I suppose. Yeah.
Brilliant. Now, can you tell me what spirituality means to you now that you've gone through all of this?
That's an interesting question. I guess really it's about tapping into that innate, it's about tapping into nature, tapping into Mother Earth, but tapping into that that being that created the whole universe, I guess. So in theta healing, we use the word creator, and we suggest that people use whatever word suits them. And I guess because I've been teaching for such a long time, that name works for me. But and I guess it's more of a trust thing. I don't know. That's a really hard question, and I have to say I haven't thought about it. There's such a sense of freedom to it because there's no rules or regulations or beliefs that you have to follow. For me, as I went along, it was about gathering bits, and I used to say putting it into my own pot and then stirring it up, and then that was my belief system. And then I'd hear something else and I think, oh yeah, that sounds okay, or no, that doesn't resonate with me. And so as you move along, you gather your own beliefs and what feels right for you, which is what I say to everybody. Check in. Does it feel right? How does it feel? And being brought up in a Catholic boarding school, it was quite interesting to notice the stuff that I didn't believe in. It was little, because the nuns were saying one thing and doing something completely different. So I didn't have respect for them. I was scared of them, but I didn't respect them. No.
See, I grew up born and raised Catholic.
Yep.
I went to Catholic schools with the Christian Brothers and all that. And as much as I don't believe in organized religion and Catholicism per se, there is a beautiful spirituality that comes out of it. There is a beautiful, the rituals, the history, and the belief that there is something much more than you and I, and I think for me, with spirituality is, and I love how you brought up trust, is actually learning to accept who you are and learning to live from this sense of authenticity and trusting in your being, because that is the one thing we are told not to do. I mean, Adam and Eve couldn't be trusted. They got sent out. You know, the priests can't be trusted because they fiddle with kids. We've been taught that throughout our years. And this innately is transferred into us, into our muscle memory, where we hold that lack of trust for ourselves, for the people around us. And it builds up an animosity, especially to ourselves. And I guess this is what you do as a healer, as a theta healer, is you're helping people break these patterns and understand their patterns and behaviors as well.
Yeah.
And that journey for me is what spirituality means to me. It's actually discovering yourself and discovering.
Yes.
Yeah. And I always find that really, really fascinating. I think, I've always been a curious child. I've had amazing connections with quite a few Christian brothers that I've known, that I've gone to school, and we're still very good friends. But they're the ones who are more alternative. They're the ones who, Brother Michael, who I adore, has ADHD. He is he's a madman who runs around, opens up universities all around the world. But at the same time, if he wasn't Catholic, he always said, I would be a Buddhist because I just love the teachings around it of compassion and love. And this is what I find amazing about the whole spiritual path, is that we are being asked to look inward. And I think COVID has done that as well.
Oh, yes. Most definitely. Certainly has taken me on a very interesting journey.
Has it?
Oh, yes. Be very careful what you say to the universe. I thought I'd done enough work that I could just, keep going till I die. And you should never say stuff like that. So, yes, my inner child was throwing the biggest tantrum earlier in the year.
Wow.
She was raging.
I think that's been quite a major thing this year.
Yeah.
Is the rage has been really, really big. I suffer from gout. Mine's a hereditary gout. I've had it since I was 23. I never, ever get it on a normal day because I eat quite healthily. But I also know that when I have to deal with things like my father, it pops up. And for the last 7 days, it's actually popped up for me, and I've been really angry. So it kind of just shows that connection between, your body, mind, and spirit, and really understanding how that works.
Yes. And theta healing could help you with that.
Yes. We'll have to talk about that later. So can you tell me how your business has changed as you've gotten to understand yourself a little bit more and you've delved more into spirituality?
Well, my business started out with me doing massage. And then as I learned each new modality, I would incorporate that into it. So, Reiki came along next, and then, I can't remember now, Bowen therapy. Well, I stopped doing massage a long time ago. And last year, which was a huge thing for me, after 20 years, I stopped doing Bowen therapy. And it was a really, really hard decision to make. But the universe had other ideas because I have really bad arthritis in my fingers. These two have gone down, but these two are, so they got a little bit better, and I thought, oh, I can do it. Somebody wanted a session, so I gave it to her, and I was in absolute agony. So I had to stop. So that was really difficult, and I went through a really interesting time. With that is to, if I'm not a Bowen therapist after 20 years, who am I? So that was that was interesting, but it was also really difficult to explain what I did when I had body work and I also had, theta healing. So it made it easier to explain what I do,
Mm.
but it was difficult to let go. And now I'm fine with it. But we just don't like change. We just don't like letting go of stuff. Or is it that we're scared? I don't know.
Yeah, and I think
So
this is.
getting back to your question, so the
Mm.
way my business started is now it's completely different. So I don't do any body work. And I also have found it really difficult because when it started, and the way that it started, just doing massage while I sort of got some money together so I could do some more things, I didn't have any foundations. It had no foundations. And I've never been great with bookwork. I told my father I never wanted to work in an office, so I never got those skills, which I'm really annoyed with myself now. Shorthand would be a fabulous tool to have when people are telling you their stories. So it's completely different. And when I was trying to rebrand and move more into Maiya, I had to sort of sit with it. And it was like Healing Steps is the bricks and mortar because the clinic is downstairs in my home. And Maiya, I'm the one that can go anywhere. Healing Steps stays here and I can go anywhere. And it was when I was thinking that I was wanting to become a speaker and do speaking gigs, and that I could teach anywhere as well. I didn't have to, because I teach here.
Mm-hmm.
We turn the garage into a training room and we use all downstairs of the house and out the front in the garden. So it has morphed. It's not what it was when I started. And the name Healing Steps came about. I was meditating on it, and I can remember lying on the bed and it suddenly popped into my head, and I thought, oh, someone would have had that. And I quickly got on and had a look and nobody did. And I thought, oh, now it's out there. Someone's going to grab it. So I got in the car and drove to Parramatta and, got the name Healing Steps. But the name for me was not just about the clients who came to see me. It was about me as well. So the logo that I had initially for Healing Steps is my eldest grandson's footprints. And he is the son of my eldest son, so the one that I put up for adoption. So when I met my eldest grandson, I was able to take him off by himself for a little while. And I realized, and he looked so much like his father. And that's when I had a huge healing experience because I'd never actually held his father and I didn't see him until he was about 6 weeks old. So for me, that was a huge healing around it. So, yeah, it was about my healing steps and also anyone that walks in here. Yeah.
So you weren't allowed to hold your own child?
No, not when you put them up for adoption. I didn't even see him. They just take them away.
Right. Okay. Wow, that's huge.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
Yeah. Was that quite a low point for you when that happened, or was that a real realization that, this is my child and I have to have him back?
I got really sick after I put him up for adoption, and I was reading something in Women's Day magazine. Now, everybody gives them a really hard time, and they're nothing like the magazines now that they used to be. And we're talking. My son's going to be 50 next year, which is just horrendous to think about. But so we're talking, 1971, and there was a story in Women's Day about a group of girls who had kept their babies, and that was all it needed for me because I had absolutely no idea how I was going to do it. And And I got really sick, and I went. The doctor came, and I said I have to go up to Newcastle because that's where the baby was. And he said, well, I shouldn't let you go, but I know how important it is. So, we went up to the hospital. I saw the social worker, who was a nun, and I said I wanted my baby back, but if a family had taken him, then I wouldn't take him away from them. I had no idea what I was going to do if that had happened. And she said, oh no, he hasn't left the hospital. I knew you'd be back. And then everybody said to me, oh, we knew you wouldn't go through with it. I'm like, well, thanks for the support. And that's when my mother said I didn't want to make it easy for you. So, yeah, it was a very
Wow.
lucky moment.
Well, that's really interesting, isn't it? Because the nuns have played such a big portion of your life.
Well, they have. They played, and that's when I went up to the unmarried mother's home. It was run by nuns. That was when I first found nuns that were nice, and the social worker was amazing. Her name was Sister Martin, and he has Martin as his second name.
Wow.
Because I figured if it wasn't for her, I wouldn't have him. So, yeah.
So what do you think your relationship with the nuns, what do you think that came about? Because obviously there's a lesson, there's a huge lesson there that's carried through.
There is. I haven't actually thought about that, Andrew. I don't know.
This would be something very interesting to explore.
It would be. And back in 2000, I went to a school reunion, and I went because I knew I needed to go, not because I wanted to go. And it was a big dinner, and we all had our maiden names on, which felt really weird. And I met up with these girls who I'd gone to boarding school with. And we used to meet up. I used to call them therapy lunches. And that was so healing because each of us had forgotten different parts of what had happened. And there was one girl who came, and she was 11. And so she remembered everything. And she'd say, don't you remember this? And we go, no. And then we go, oh, yeah. So we started to piece it all together. And I started to realise where some of my quirks had come from, why I was a bit thingy about having showers. But apparently we were only allowed to shower every second day and change our clothes every second day. And we were all always hungry. She said, don't you remember people used to go in, break into the first aid kit and eat the throaties?
Really?
And that's when I realised I actually went through puberty at boarding school. So watching my kids, they just kept eating all the time. So, yeah, lots of stuff.
Wow. And tell me a little bit about this healing process that you've been going through for the last 30 years. How do you feel about this? Because I think this is really important, because a lot of people who think they go on the spiritual path and it's going to be easy, or they go on the spiritual path and they think, oh, I'm just going to sail through this because I don't have that many issues. But when people come to me as a client, I always ask them, I really question them. I said, are you really ready for this? Are you ready for the good, the bad, the ugly? Because guess what? They will all come out. And if you're not ready, then, this is not the time for you to be doing it, because you've got to be ready.
That's interesting. I've never said that to anyone, but yeah.
Well, because I know from my point of view, I was always the curious child. I was always interested in self-healing and all of that. And my parents are not that interested. I remember when I brought crystals home for the first time, and I was lying down in the bed, with the chakra colors and the crystals going on there. And I remember my dad going, oh, what's this Isis doing here lying on the bed? And it's that kind of thing that, some people will get the support, others will not.
Yes.
And the journey is always interesting, and it's not always easy.
No, it's not. And what is interesting is looking back on it to see that you did know stuff when you were little, but people told you were crazy and you shut it down.
Mm.
So one instance is my mother used to tell me all the time that I didn't feel whatever it was I said I felt. So I was incredibly confused about my feelings. And when my stepfather was dying, he was diagnosed with a brain tumour, and he went into hospital, and the surgeon came to see us afterwards to give us the prognosis, and he told us that he had debulked it, but there was nothing he could do about it. So I started to cry, which, it's a perfectly reasonable response when someone tells you that. And my mother just looked at me, gave me that look and said, "Don't, you'll make me cry." And I went, "Oh my God, that's what you've done to me my whole life." It was all about her. So yeah, always about her. My mother was a narcissist, so very, very difficult when you're an empathic child to grow up with a narcissistic parent. But yeah. And then after he passed away, she came to Sydney, long story. But anyway, she ended up on the psych ward at Westmead Hospital. And that was, I think, probably the most horrendous thing I ever went through, and the most freeing experience, because what happened was she started behaving to me the way she did when I was a child. And so I would go to visit her, and as soon as I started feeling like a little kid, I'd just get up and I'd walk out. And I had no one to talk to about it, because nobody had the same relationship that I did with my mother. So nobody understood it. People thought I was crazy because she had these amazing blue eyes and knew how to win everybody over. So that was the worst, probably the worst time of my life. Probably even worse than Dad's death, which was saying something. But it really taught me so much about what happened when I was growing up, what it was like for me as a child. Yeah. So yes.
That's big. That is pretty big.
Yeah.
And tell me how theta healing has helped you, and also if you could explain to our viewers, what is theta healing?
Well, theta healing is really hard to describe. And I ask all of my students, how would you describe this to somebody else? And none of them can come up with a description that you could actually use for marketing. The official definition is that it's a meditative practice of a spiritual technique that works on the physical, the emotional, and the spiritual. And that's not, they're not the right words. And when I think that doesn't really explain what it is. So yes, it does all of that, but that just seems so simple. So yes, we go into a meditative state. We go up into what we call the seventh plane, which is connecting to the creator of all that is. That's when you get into a theta state. But when I teach it, what I'm teaching them are skills that they can use in all areas of their life. So yes, they learn how to do the digging, which is what theta healing's most famous for. So you go down through the layers to find out what's the bottom belief that's holding it all there. And unlike going to see a counsellor or a psychologist, you don't have to sit in the story. And I always used to get into trouble from my teacher, Mark. He used to say, "You don't need to know the story." And I'd be like, "But yes, I do." So if you're a holistic counsellor, you want to know where the person sits in their world, like who do they live with, who's their next circle of support. But if someone's been abused, they don't need to tell you their story. You just need to go down through the feelings. So how did that make you feel? When's the first time you felt like that? What was the worst thing about that? And then when we get to the bottom, we know we're at the bottom because we muscle test. And then like magic, we just remove it. and then everything that else that's been sitting on top of it all those years just has nowhere to sit, so it just disappears. And then
Wow.
you can teach people feelings that they may never have been able to experience before. So unconditional love is one that a lot of people have never experienced. And yes, it sounds very woo-woo, and it is. So they're the two main things about it, removing beliefs and teaching people feelings. But, you know, we also do body scans, we do angel readings, like
Mm-hmm.
we do ancestor readings, we do future readings. So in that 3 days, you've got all of these tools that you can use in all areas of your life. I have one girl who came and did the basic course, and she was doing a reading on her partner, and I just said to her, have you ever done that before? And she said, no, never. And I said, oh my God, that's amazing. I said, I can just see you sitting at a school fete, you know, at a table with a crystal ball and a scarf and earrings. She was just giving so much detail, and yet, you know, she'd never done it before because she'd suddenly had an opportunity to experience her different psychic senses. But
Beautiful.
just to tap into those alone would be, you know, enough for the 3 days. But there's just so much more. And then you get to practice it. So you get to realize how you get your information, and then, you know, build on that, and then learn all the other ones. So people come and do the course mainly for their own personal development. People will tell me they just felt drawn to come and work with me. So, you know, it's really hard to know how you market that. But all of them leave. I haven't had anyone at the end of 3 days say that was a load of rubbish.
So,
You know, or I learnt nothing. They all leave with so many tools, but also the ability to not be impacted by other people's energy, not be or have tools to cope with what other people say and do around them. So their relationships improve. They have tools they can use at work for not getting caught up in all the politics and the craziness that goes on in work situations. Yeah. And everyone will get something different out of it depending on what it was that they most needed. Yeah.
can you explain what that? So theta is a state of being,
It's a
or
brain
that's
wave.
it's a brain wave,
Yeah.
like delta and
Yep.
yeah.
Yeah. And alpha is the brain wave you go into when you're doing Reiki.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And theta is the brain wave that, you know, Buddhist monks have spent years trying to get into. And I will teach you like a page worth of reading, and then, you know, when you've done it a few times, you just say one word and you get to the same place. So yeah.
Amazing. So tell me, what do you think, or what do you feel is the thing that brings you most joy and happiness right now in your life and your vocation?
Teaching theta healing. Seeing clients one-on-one is fabulous. But teaching is my real passion, because I seem to be able to hold a safe space for people. There's lots of laughter, there's lots of tears. Everyone's able to do it. That seems to be my zone of genius.
That's one
I
thing I did.
The last course that I did, and I just sat back and noticed how I was feeling, and I thought, yeah, this is it. This is to be able to create that space where people are able to talk about things that have happened in their life in front of people that they've only just met. That's pretty amazing.
And that is the one thing that I have noticed about you, and in the many years that we've done fairs together, is that when you see Maiya at a fair, there's a beautiful calm aura around you while everyone is running around, going, "Whoa, look at this crystal," You've got a beautiful center when you're there, and people are drawn to you like that.
Yeah.
And this is that gift that you have in able to hold space for people.
Yes, yes. I obviously do have that gift, um, and I'm able to acknowledge that. Whereas, years gone, I would, oh no, 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 that's not,
Yeah.
I, years ago it was, yes, I can do, yes, I'm okay, but Mary Jane down the road's better than me, or John over there can do it better than me.
Yeah.
But
You've
yeah,
come to a position where you realize you're
yeah,
enough now, aren't you?
yeah, I am enough. Yeah. And that was the ebook that I wrote. It's okay to be me, because yeah, I am enough. And I wasn't. For most of my life, I wasn't. All I wanted was for my mother to acknowledge me, to wasn't even that I wanted her to tell me she loved me, which she never did. Just to acknowledge that I was okay, basically, which is why I named my ebook that. That I was an okay mother, that but yeah, she wasn't, she was incapable of giving me what I needed, and that's just how it was.
And that's something that I think we all have to learn as adults, isn't it? That we can keep ourselves safe, and we don't need the approval of anyone but ourselves.
That's right.
And we need to really understand and love who we are to be able to live that authentic life.
Yeah. And then it's come up really strongly the last few years that when I've been working with clients one-on-one, it's about that inner child, and doing inner child work was, really big in the 90s, and then it sort of died off. It wasn't quite as popular, but working with clients, I keep seeing it's that little person inside that's hurting, and the only person that can give that little person what they need is you,
Mm-hmm.
because you're the only one. So we spend our whole life, if the dog doesn't start, I'll get my earphones. Sorry. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's good.
It's the dog next door that's gone off. So we spend our whole lives looking outside, wanting people to give us what we need, and they haven't got a clue. They haven't got a clue. And half the time, last week I did a 3-day inner child reconnection. I've got a page called The Alchemy of Empowerment on Facebook, and I ran it 3 days in a row, and it was about that. It was about connecting back with that inner child within you, and learning how to give them whatever it was that they missed out on, how to support them. And I know myself that I used to set people up, especially my husband. If he loved me, he would know that I wanted that, whatever painting or that I'd seen somewhere. How on earth would he know that? Like, he didn't see it, I didn't tell him, but that if he loved me enough, he'd know that that's what I wanted, whatever it might be.
I know. I recently said that to my partner, actually. I said, I may be psychic, but I'm not a mind reader. You have to ask the questions.
Exactly. So,
And
we all do it. It's not just me. I know we all do it. Right?
yeah.
I know I've been guilty of in the past. I don't do it anymore. But yeah, and we set people up all the time.
Yeah.
And if they loved me, they'd know. And all we do is hurt ourselves. We don't. It's not about. They don't get upset about it.
Yeah.
So if you know that you really, really want something, then really, really go out and get it.
Yeah. That's exactly right. Yeah, and I talk about this a lot with my clients. I said, everything is about awareness, choice, and action. If we've got the awareness, we still need to make the choice, and we have to action it, because if you don't, you're still at the awareness stage. And it's so important to understand, that diversity and that spectrum that we're on, and that, being spiritual is not just sitting down there trying to manifest and make it happen. We actually have to do the work.
We do.
Yeah.
Yeah. It doesn't just happen by dreaming about it.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. So for all of you out there who, who are looking or are on your spiritual path right now, realize that there is work to do, and we need to put our path, put our stamp on it and put the work into getting to where we want to be, and not just expect it to fall on our lap, because it doesn't work like that.
No, it doesn't.
And if it did, you'd never learn the lessons that you need to learn.
Well, that's right. It depends on your belief system, but if you believe that you came here to learn, lessons, then if you don't learn them, you're just going to have to repeat them next time.
That's right. That's right. Well, thank you so much for telling us your story and
You're
being
welcome.
brave, because it is a big thing to tell your story to a large amount of people, because there's a lot of pain, there's hurt, there's joy, but people need to hear that, and people need to realize that it is normal to go through all of this, and it's all about weaving and bridging everyday life with your spirituality that makes you a whole person, because we no longer
definitely
can compartmentalize anymore. So,
and anyone that thinks that life is just going to go along like that, they're having themselves on. That's not how it goes. And you don't get to be happy all the time. And a fabulous movie to watch is Inside Out. Have you seen it?
Yes, I have.
Yeah.
It is brilliant.
Yeah. Because it doesn't work like that. Poor old Joy, she was just...
That's right. Yeah. That's right. So if you're interested in working with Maiya, either one-on-one or learning theatre healing, you can find Maiya on maiyakenny.com.au.
No, not quite yet.
Not quite yet?
Well,
okay.
it's you could actually, because there's a holding page. So it's maiya.com.au.
Maiya.com.au.
Yeah.
And your other website is?
It's healingsteps.com.au.
And you can also find Maiya on Facebook, on her Facebook page, as well as her groups as well. So make sure you find out a little bit more about her. And also, if you come onto the Spiritual Co-op page, Maiya is also in our directory. So come on, say hello. She doesn't bite. In fact, she is absolutely lovely to be around. And drop a message if you'd like to know more.
And I look forward to hearing from you.
Yeah. Thank you so much for being a part.
Thank you, Andrew. Today. It's been wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah. And from our heart to yours, take care of yourself and the people around you. And we will see you next week.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.